Welcome to the Saturday Night Live Afterparty. This week, we'll be discussing Season 47, Episode 16 of SNL with host Jerrod Carmichael and musical guest Gunna. I'm Catherine Coleman, and I am joined this week by Steve Finn and Toronto-based writer Brian Crosby. If you'd like to connect with Brian, you can do so at briancrosby.net. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can do so at snlpodcast.com. All right, here we go. Welcome back, everyone. I'm excited to be here, excited to talk SNL. I don't know if you've been watching the news, but I don't know, apparently one guy slapped another guy, and then half this episode's going to be about that. I'm excited to break that down. But first, Steve, you brought a friend with you today. Who's this guy?
Thank you for noticing. You know me. I'm always trying to sneak people past the door guy. And this is my latest guest. Brian and I go way back. He's one of the reasons that I miss living in Toronto, which is where we connected. We used to be in a band together. And, Zoom has to, add a tackle hug feature because seeing Brian today, that's just what I want to do because I love the guy. He's a close personal friend of mine. Brian, I love you.
I love you too, Steve.
Welcome to the show.
I virtually hug you also.
But let's get to know Brian. We should get to know him a little bit. Brian, are you ready to bare your soul to the whole world?
Yes. Yeah.
The billions and billions of people listening right now.
I've been meditating. I've been readying my nervous system for your intense questions.
Right. So yeah, we go ways back and we know each other from like playing music together, but you are, pretty much an icon when it comes to Canadian sketch comedy. You've worked on some very large comedy institutions. It's a big list. I believe you've brought that list of accomplishments with you. Did you not?
Icon is certainly a bit much, but thank you. I was just explaining, before we started recording, my career has been a little circuitous, but certainly really interesting. When I was younger, I really liked jokes and politics. And I started my career as a sketch comedian primarily and worked on a number of television programs that dealt with political comedy and humor. And then a couple years ago, did the Al Franken and bailed on comedy and now work in government. And maybe I'll get back to writing in the near future. I don't know. But specifically, I wrote on several seasons of the Royal Canadian Air Farce, which was sort of, if I may say, a little bit aggrandizing, but sort of Canada's Saturday Night Live. A very long-running Canadian political sketch comedy show that was a radio show and then a TV show for probably 30 years. I didn't write on the 30 years of it, but on the tail end of that. And I also wrote several episodes of This Hour's 22 Minutes, which is our other institutional Canadian political sketch comedy show. I also wrote on for a couple of years as a contributing writer on The Irrelevant Show, which was a sort of non sequitur, absurdist radio sketch comedy show. So all of my experiences in sketch writing, and particularly in sort of political sketch comedy.
Wow.
Brian is just the kind of guy that pisses you off because he's so talented. And, instead of God just divvying it up, he gave a big whopping dollop of talent to Brian. But, he puts out so much amazing stuff. It's great. Brian, I know you're not, a every episode SNL watcher. I know you are a fan. So can you tell me how SNL played a role in your need to do comedy? I know you've worked under the tutelage of Robin Duke before. So yeah, how does SNL factor in?
I've always really liked it as an institution. Like I know when you have guests on the show and you ask them like what their era was, and I'm hopefully not preempting it. I just think it's such a fascinating bit of pop culture. Like every era has its value. every era says something about the zeitgeist and what comedy is at that time. Even the areas that might not be your favorite eras, I think have something value in them to say. And I think that's what I really liked about it. It wasn't so much that like my era was the era, and I think for me it'd be the mid '90s. It'd be sort of the Will Ferrell era was the one that I grew up on. But like I don't consider that like the best one. I think they're all really interesting in their own way. I really like the last decade or so. I feel like now we're sort of I don't know where we're going. We're in a transition. You know, we're out of the Will Forte Kristen Wiig era. Like we're beyond that now. But that was a great era too.
How familiar are you with the current cast and this era?
Pretty familiar. I think it doesn't resonate for me as much as some of the others that I've mentioned. I feel like it's still finding. It's in that SNL. It goes through those ebbs and flows, right? Like it sort of discovers an identity, and then it needs to find itself a little bit, and then it does. And to me, I feel like it's in that now. Like it's trying to figure out exactly what it is a little bit. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's not doing good work at all. It just means that maybe its tone is a little bit less definable under certain casts than it is others.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I don't disagree with that. And I think it's an interesting time to watch for its own reasons in these kind of peaks versus the valleys versus the peaks. So yeah, I think you're on the money there.
Well, there's a lot of opportunity in it. You know, if you want to think about it like, I don't know, this is a weird analogy, but like investing, you know, you buy low and you sell high. And when it's low, those are where the opportunities are, right? Like that's when there's opportunities for the cast to define themselves. When the show is already defined and you're coming into the show where there's already like heavy hitters on it, like that's tough to do. But if you were coming into the cast new, where like you're in that rebuilding phase, that's a great opportunity for the comedy to find its new voice. So I don't see them as necessarily like one's better or worse than the other. It's just they're different kinds of animals.
Yep.
I love that way of looking at it. Yeah.
That's the way to look at it, I think. Catherine, do you have anything to add while we're getting to know Brian?
No. I feel satisfied. I now believe you that Brian knows what he's talking about. I think I think he's going to give us some good insight. I'm just excited to hear what he has to say about the show.
Yes, he's earned his wristband, I think, to get in the venue.
He's earned the wristband.
Yes.
Let's move on.
All right. Well, let's get into it. For the cold open, Fox and Friends cover all of the headlines from the last few weeks. Now, Brian, you just you touted your political topical comedy chops. What'd you make of this?
It was all right. It was all right. Yeah, I think these grab bag sketches can be hit or miss. It's like it's not a sketch with a central premise. It's like, as you said, like let's cover the gamut. Let's cover all the ground. You know? So I think there were some bits in it that I really enjoyed. I really still like that Trump impression. It's still really fun. You know, it is like a one joke bit, but like I love it every time that they do it. There was a great interview. I don't know if you saw it on Seth Meyers' show where he was talking about like how he came up with that impression. And that actually really helped for me like understand like what he's doing. Now I like it even more now that I understand the mechanics of it. So I still really like it, and he just talks nonsense for like 3 minutes, and it's solid. So I still love that bit. The Fox and Friends is like, it's a decent envelope. It's a decent container to do like whatever they want to do with it.
Yeah, it wasn't a big win for me because like we said, they're just sort of plowing through headlines without offering much commentary on it. Like there's jokes in there, but it didn't feel super focused.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like the Trump impression is really good, and there's always something to like about it. But maybe as our resident American, I'm like, please no.
I feel you. You know, like as much as I enjoy it, like what are we adding at this point?
Right.
I think
right.
Maybe it's the feeling I have.
Like even the few episodes, I don't remember who was on here, but they were saying like, yeah, I haven't watched it all, and I'm just really sad that they're still doing Trump. And I was like, they've actually, they've done it like 3 or 4 times. Like it's been tasteful so far. But now, like this time, I'm starting to feel like, okay, we are just gonna keep coming back to this, aren't we? So I didn't love that, but there were some things here that were working. So I liked the bit with like Fox trying to seem hip, and they had that Outcast "Sorry Miss Jackson" joke that was really funny. And I thought Heidi and Alex and Mikey were doing some good work here. I thought they were really nailing their Fox roles. So yeah, like there was some stuff to like about it, but it wasn't a huge win for me. Steve, what'd you think?
Well, at this point, it really feels like they go into the writer's room and bring up the conversation. What should our cold open be for this week? And then they spend 5 minutes talking about it before they just give up and say, let's do Fox. We got a whole show to write. We can't spend too much time figuring this out. But that's just because I feel that we are getting a lot of Fox content, and they are mixing it up with different Fox shows. I mean, it's still content on this network. This particular show, I feel, belongs in the era where Taryn, Vanessa, and Bobby would play these characters. That's my Fox and Friends, because I don't watch the show, and when I think of the show, I think of that era of SNL. But it is its own thing. They're not trying to retread the beats that they used to harp on back in that day. So, it does look familiar because it's parodying the same show. They don't seem to change their set or anything as the years go on. Well, but yeah, I feel I get what you're feeling, Catherine, about how we're getting oversaturated with it. And I feel you there, but another part of me says, I like that they're casting a wide net for casual viewers who only watch 1 or 2 episodes a year. I really want those people to catch this. And if they do it every other week, that many more people are finding this beautiful, fresh impression of Trump that is somehow made it funny again to go back to this old subject. So, I'm torn on it.
I think the challenge of this bit is that you want it to be so relevant. Like SNL, especially on the political writing, is so great and so much a part of the zeitgeist when there is something to comment on, when there's a campaign happening. And people tune into SNL just for the opener, just to see like how are they going to parody that, the debate that just happened 2 days ago.
Yeah, the debate's on Friday, and now this is here. Yeah.
Right? Like that's the best use of this segment, or to me it is anyway. And I think it is for some people. And so when there maybe isn't something to like really sink your teeth into, then you get this version of it, where it's just sort of like, it's not about one particular thing, and it's not about sort of relieving any particular national tension. It's just like, well, these are like a bunch of little things that happened, and we can throw in the Trump impression because everybody still likes that sort of, and that'll be good enough. I'm like, there's some good bits in it, but like, it's hard to watch it and not think, I would love it if there was just something like really meaty that they could have done with it.
Yeah. Especially if it's going to take up 8 minutes of the show.
Yeah.
Which is a lot.
I really thought it was going to be Oscars related this time, but apparently they're waiting on that.
They got to hold that for later. All right. Well, let's move on. Let's talk about this monologue. Jerrod is not going to talk about the slap, and you can't make him. Steve, was this a win?
It was a win. Yeah. It was a successful introduction of myself to Jerrod Carmichael, not only his comedy, but the pronouncing of his first name. Thank you, Daryl, for saving my butt before coming here and calling him Jerrod. I slept on this guy, and I got to sheepishly admit that. I feel like this is a comedian I would actually really enjoy if I gave him a shot. I really appreciated the way that he played it completely to the audience in front of him. Like, when you watch monologue after monologue with, movie stars and musicians, they don't take their eyes off of that cue card, which essentially makes them looking into the camera, right? And to have him just make eye contact with the audience the whole time felt very, it was strange because it was removed from me, but it still made it feel more intimate. I feel the connection he had with the people there. And yeah, it kind of made me feel like I was in the audience a little bit.
Like a real stand-up.
Yeah. I was a little bit confused because, I really like the premise of the monologue. There's just, when he came out and said, I'm not going to talk about it, the thing is, he just had kind of a big news thing drop about himself. And I kind of thought he was talking about himself coming out. And that's what I thought I'm not going to talk about it was. So, I mean, if that wasn't the big headline from the release of his special, I probably would have got the joke as intended because, yes, we were all talking about the Will Smith slap. But, it was still funny. It was still a really great way of addressing it. And yeah, aside from all that, I was just getting to know Jerrod and his style, his delivery, and I just love it. It's very calm, very. It feels like it's off the cuff, but you can also tell that it's very well rehearsed. And yeah, I just love that natural vibe he has.
This was fabulous. It was so funny. He showed such ownership of the stage, like you were saying, Steve. Like, I mean, it felt like watching him at his little comedy club downtown. Like it felt intimate. It felt like he wasn't overwhelmed with like the gravitas of like Studio 8H. It was just a stage for him. And it got me excited. I wasn't overly familiar with him, but I was like, oh, I like this guy. But what I thought was so smart in the moment where I was first watching it was that this was going to be the take on the slap. Obviously they later go on to beat that horse, but as he was going and I was watching it live, I thought, wow, they know they have to address it. They can't get by with not mentioning it. But it was a week ago. So I love that the way they're going to talk about it is in a way that acknowledges that it's old news and like we can put them, it's out of the way. We have some funny content on it. We can put it behind us and move on with the show. That didn't happen, but I thought in the moment it was really smart that was what they were going to do. But aside from the rest of the show, if I'm looking at just the monologue, I thought it was so funny. I thought it was so great. And I loved the Obama joke. So it was a really, really big win for me. Brian, where'd you land?
Yeah, I really liked it. Like this is the zeitgeist moment that like the first segment often is, but wasn't. This is the moment for them to address something. And like, what an interesting moment. I thought his take on it was perfect for the moment. Like, and he's talking about like breaking it down day by day. And I think everyone had a similar-ish experience of feeling like, oh my God, what just happened? And then being bored of it and then consumed by it all over again. And so to get to the end of the week and the premise be like, I'm done. Like I've been riding this roller coaster for several days and I don't want to talk about it, but obviously still talking about it, right. Made it palatable. And you know what I was thinking? I wanted to throw this at you. When he was doing it, or after the, I watched, I was thinking, this could be a Chris Rock bit. I could hear this. It's like refined maybe a little bit in his voice. Like I could see him walking out onto a stage or in a special, and the first thing being like, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it. And then, but insisting, like he would come in and out, like he would get aggressive. He'd be like, I'll say this one thing. I'll just say this one thing about, and he would say his bit, but I'm not going to talk about it. But I won't, but don't get me. I promised I wouldn't do it, but let me just add this one more, I could see him doing like an in and out like that in his voice, in Chris Rock's voice. Anyway, in that sense, I thought it was a great response. Like that's how I would imagine Chris Rock would do it, and he did a great job.
Awesome. So high marks on the monologue. Let's keep going. Is my brain okay? If you have to ask, it's probably not. Steve, is your brain okay?
I'm good. How are you?
What'd you think of this?
Laughing at at what you know with this one for sure. Definitely some relatable stuff. And this is coming from a guy who never thought himself to be that smart. Like what was Jerrod's character, like the marketing director for IBM?
Something like
I'm there
that,
sitting there like, I wish I was falling from that height. But yeah, we can all relate to this for sure. It's been tough on brains. We've certainly made a sacrifice for the good of the world with what we've been through the last couple of years. And yeah, this is probably the right form of conversation for living through the pandemic right now. And I like how they did it. A game show is a tried, tested, and true format for a sketch. That goes without saying. But this was especially sloppy. This felt like really thrown together. The rules were kind of not really concrete. But what would normally be something to complain about in a sketch, I think it actually works for this. That everybody who is still going to their jobs despite the compromising of their brains, they're still putting a show together, and it's just barely there. And I think they nailed that vibe with this sketch.
Let me ask you a question. I want to ask you a question about that and challenge your idea. But I'm happy to be wrong, which is I feel like this is a easy format for them, right? Like every now and then they do a game show that's never existed and it's a one-off. And I think I often feel like those sketches are a little bit sloppy. And I wonder if in this circumstance, it's sort of fortuitous in a way, or like the sloppiness sort of works in the way that you suggested because it's a show about people who like our brains are broken. So in this case, is it sort of like a happy accident that the sloppiness of the sketch maybe isn't dragging it down in the way it might with other versions of this format?
Yeah, I may be like putting my own spin on how this ended up, but I could totally see a conversation being like, hey, you know how our game show sketches usually turn out? I mean, wouldn't that lend itself well to people not thinking very well? I mean, that's not a very nice gesture towards themselves as writing talent, but yeah, I think the intentional sloppiness may be something I'm projecting. You're not wrong, Brian.
Yeah, I wonder if it's systemically sloppy and then just like coincidentally good in this case.
Well, Brian, now I'm curious, what do you find typically sloppy about the game show?
I mean, this would be like a writer's perspective, I think, on this. But I think what's sloppy about it is that they're forcing the idea into an easy format. Like a game show is something that's immediately recognizable. The audience will know what it is. Even though the game show may not have existed before, people understand rules of game shows. It's just immediately relatable as a format. It's a good shell for something. And so they can take nonsense concepts and shove them into that, and it makes them understandable really quickly. So good, that's the plus. But the downside in it is that probably that idea doesn't belong in that format. It doesn't take to it as naturally as it should, because whatever they're laughing at probably was not conceived as a game show. Like whatever they're sitting around the table and they're like, God, is your brain broken? Like can we make jokes out of broken brains? And they're trying to come up with a premise for a bit. And eventually someone was like, let's just do a game show. The game show format is the home of all our nonsense ideas that we can't find homes for in other formats or in other premises. And so you just end up like banging this thing into a shape until it works well enough. That's my theory about how they make those.
That's brilliant.
Would it be accurate to say you feel like they're just sort of lazy?
Well,
to put an idea into a game show.
Well, they're not. I mean, there's a certain economy to making this kind of TV show, right? Like you don't always have the benefit of doing your version of it. Like there's a lot of
Mhm.
sketches that'll work great on a stage that won't work great on the screen, just because it's a different location and people's expectations are different and whatnot. And you say that all the time. Like there's a lot of it's all the back end, right? The back
Right,
end
yeah.
sketches that are like, what the heck is this even doing on TV? It's so weird. Might work great on a stage.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of that on TV shows or sketch TV shows in particular, where you're trying to figure out how to translate an idea from people sitting around in the writer's room to something that the audience will understand. And this is a vehicle. This is like something that translates that quickly and easily
Mhm.
from like us being weird, absurdist human beings in a room that no one can see to something that the regular audience can get in like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
This is a
It's
great
instant rise
vehicle.
yeast.
Yes.
Mhm.
So and that happens all the time. And like the Fox and Friends thing is a great example of that. It's like we've got half an idea, we can just shove it into that envelope. And like,
Yeah.
does it feel perfectly natural? No. Does it work well enough? And do we have to move on to other things right now because it's already Thursday? Yes.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, that's a lot to consider. For this specific one, I sort of liked where it ended up. I thought it was a fun idea. We even, I think, Brian, we were talking about this a little bit up top. Like, it's weird to socialize now. Like, I don't know how to function in society. So, like, I think this is a very relatable thing, especially towards the end of the sketch, or after they got over like the initial hump of it. Like, we don't know the day of the week. There's
Mm.
this long birthday story. We don't know how to start a conversation. All that stuff's like great. I think it's universal yet specific. Um, so that was good. But this beginning of it wasn't a particularly strong start for me, because I don't know. I think this is so nitpicky, and I acknowledge that. But like the wheelbarrow thing felt too dumb and not specific enough.
Mm.
Like it didn't feel like something COVID related I would forget. So it felt like there just could have been something better there. And then like I also was like, oh, these people are just all really dumb, instead of like easing me into it. Like I guess I wish they would have been like, oh yeah, that's that thing. And you put stuff like they had like been trying to work through the answer a little bit rather than just saying like random crazy things. I feel like that might have brought us more onto the same page going into the sketch. But that's nitpicky. Like overall, it was a win for me.
You're right. But farm
But
bicycle's not going to
yeah.
be your moment of the night or anything.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But my little rant aside, I did really like the line. I've already forgotten his job. I think you said he was a marketing guy, but he was Jerrod was introducing himself, and he was like, "What do you do?" He was like, "Oh, I'm a marketing executive for something." Like, and what do you do now? Mushrooms.
Yeah.
I did like that line quite a bit.
Hmm. Yeah, like there's definitely some gems in here. Like I love that the prize is stem cells.
Yeah,
That's great. And that I think the host's name was like she didn't have a last name.
I think it was Lisa something.
Lisa
Yeah, it's literally Lisa something.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Yeah. So some things to like, but maybe some a few little issues and a lot to consider for game shows in general. But let's keep going. Let's talk about how when I want to watch a movie, there's only one thing I'm looking for, and it's a short ass movie. With cameos from Gunna and Simon Rex. I loved this, guys. I think it had all of the hallmarks of a great SNL song. It was super catchy, it was funny, and the video was just produced to the nines. I mean, like all those sets were amazing, the costumes were fantastic, the animations were really cool. But the biggest win for me was just the point it made, because this is something my husband and I complain about all the time. It's like these movies are just too damn long now. Every movie doesn't have to be 2.5 hours. It's really okay. And then like the Batman was 3 hours long, and there was no reason it needed to be 3 hours.
Too long.
I have an app on my phone where when I see a movie in the theater, it vibrates at me when it's a good time to go pee.
I've
And
heard of that.
and then it gives me a synopsis of what I missed. Like if I have to turn that on, your movie's too long. There's nothing you can put in this film that justifies me having to plan when I'm going to pee because it's 3 hours long. So that's my rant for this episode, is that they are right. This is an issue, and I'm glad that they have brought it into the spotlight. It's in the forefront of our minds. Maybe it's going to be fixed now. Pete Davidson is healing the world. But no, I thought this was great, and I love that they got that King of Staten Island punchline in there. Yeah, Brian, was it a win for you?
I thought it was okay. I appreciate, building on your point, I appreciate the production value of these videos. I don't know if this is now like a Pete Davidson thing specifically, but he's done a couple of these music videos over the past little while, and like the production value in all of them are great. Like they're fun to watch, even if you don't love the joke or love the bit as much. So I really appreciate all the creativity that goes into it. I mean, there's way more money in this than there was ever like the Lonely Island bits.
Right.
You know,
like think about Lazy Sunday. They like filmed it themselves.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I really appreciate that. And they're always fun to watch. Also like the Staten Island gag. Staten Island is too long as a movie. So appreciate that he's self-aware enough to do that. Yeah, I thought it was an okay for me. But again, appreciate all the effort that goes into it and all the creativity.
Fair enough. Steve, anything to add?
Just, that I enjoyed the subject matter because it's one of those ideas for a music video or a song where I guess you don't realize you would relate to it until somebody says it. It's like, oh yeah, I do sit down on Netflix and veto all of the, 100 plus minute movies. And it's hilarious. And it's such a gamble. A 90-minute movie could mean it's either great or absolute garbage, because you have the 90-minute movies, which are brilliant filmmakers who are able to tell a story they want to tell concisely, which is a challenge in itself. And then you have like these Bruce Willis straight to video movies where it's like, okay, we got to keep filling this up till it hits 90 minutes. What do you got? What can we film cheaply and just fill the time to trick people into watching this movie? Those are your two options for movies of that length. But I don't know. It's
children's movies.
Yeah. I think it's a good idea for this kind of format. Like, this is a very gangster type of song, and they're singing about a very non-gangster thing. Like, they're not rapping about their Gucci in their closet or their $100 bills or whatever. They're talking about the dilemma of choice on Netflix. It's very benign for this kind of going hard attitude. And I think that's at the end of the day where a lot of the humor comes from.
All right. Well, decent win on short movies. Let's move on. This doll has pubes, which are actually just an anchor point, which you would know if you were a doll maker. Steve, what'd you think?
This was a wow moment for the show. One of those sketches where you're like, okay, this must have been a back and forth with standards and practices, but sounds like they won a few battles on that warfield. Makes you wonder like what they compromised over and like what the raw unfiltered version of this would look like. But man, I was really surprised at what they were able to get permission to do, basically. Yep. It made me uncomfortable, which it meant to do. So, I guess I have to congratulate them for that. And yeah, it was a great sketch for this host. Jerrod really brought a good vibe to this. And Mikey and Cecily were just nailing that persona.
Oh,
and
yeah, so good.
Damn, before they even got to the premise, like I was just enjoying their banter and God, can't get enough of Cecily just hamming it up.
Yeah, Mikey, one of my notes says like Mikey's accent's great. I know I'm from the South originally. I know so many men that talk exactly like that. And just really spot on nailing that character. Brian, do you agree with Steve's take on this?
Lots of things I liked about it. Weirdly, I think my favorite joke is the joke about the whatever the scream noise is off the top and at the end.
Squealing. Yeah.
Yeah, the squeal deal. Squeal deal? Yeah. It has nothing to do with the sketch at all, but that was pretty funny. I was surprised that wasn't the rest of the sketch. That was my expectation. Like, oh, it's going to be like sound effects that don't work in the context, and it wasn't. I think it's a challenging bit to do. I think for me, it falls into the category of like physical comedy bits that you really have to love at its first iteration, which would include everything from like puke sketches, which I don't know if we do anymore, but when somebody's got the tube up their sleeve and they put it to their mouth and they puke like 8 times over the course of the sketch, or even the bit that they did a couple of weeks ago where it was like a kids show and there was like a kid looking for something in a it was like a pool of, I don't know, water or like mashed potatoes or something.
Oh,
you
yeah,
remember
yeah,
that
yeah.
one? Where the whole bit is just like, let's watch somebody flail around in a weird pool of goop. Like, I would put all this into the same category of, we're going to show you something, it's going to be weird looking, and you better really like it on the first iteration, because we're going to do it 8 more times. So yeah, I think those are always really tough to do. And not that they can't be good in that way. Like, I definitely watch versions of this sketch where I think like, this, whatever you're doing right now is really stupid, but the fact that you're continuing to do it makes it even better. Like you're just going to double down on it with that confidence. In this case, they sort of like tried to hit the middle of the road of like, oh, we're going to try and mix it up. We're going to try and find different ways of making you uncomfortable watching this. I think this is a particular kind of thing for a particular kind of person. Like, you have to enjoy that sort of like cringe comedy style of like, I think you got to be like to your point, Steve, like you have to be watching it thinking like, how did this get past censors? And then, like enjoying that mind experiment while you watch it.
Maybe this is a comment on who I am, but I loved it. Once it got going, I loved it, because like you sort of started to allude to there, Brian. You're like, oh, I thought this was going to be the game with the squealing, and then it wasn't. I think we had a really good reveal with like, and that was awesome. I love where it went. I love the second outfit didn't cover it up. I like Mikey saying he said the doll went to college. Like, there's a lot to like here for me. I just wish there wasn't so much setup. I mean, there's the intro with the squealing. There's the Jesus lunchbox. There's a lengthy explanation of the doll. And then it has pubes. Which is the point of the sketch. Like that, if I put that on a script, I feel like it'd be on page 3, which is very, very late in sketch comedy. Because I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, okay, like hip Christian lunchboxes, that's funny. Oh, we're done with that. Okay, a doll. The doll's not funny. This is actually just a really good idea for a product. What's the funny thing? Oh, she has pubes. There's a whole third of the sketch where I'm trying to figure out what we're laughing at. What's this thing going to be?
World building.
I just can't help to think, like, if we took those 2 minutes and we put them at the end, could there have been a male version of the doll? Could we have finally got the pubes out and then she has like a weirdly like realistic vagina? Like, I realized standards might have said no. Like, I realized there's more to it than just my off the top of my head brainstorming. But like, I don't know. I feel like there was more that we could have gotten with the game of the sketch had we trimmed that. I don't work there. Had they trimmed up that first little bit. So I don't know. It's like it ultimately paid off and I really liked it, but I have some complaints,
Fair.
Yeah. So kind of mixed reviews, but I think there was something to like about it from all of us. Let's move on to this seat filler at the Oscars. He was really excited to meet Will Smith. Brian, what'd you make of this?
I thought they could have done either more with it or less with it. One or the other. Steve, you might have said this off the top. I can't remember which one of us said it, but somebody else that we were talking at the beginning was saying, like, we thought that they would cover this in a particular way, and they chose for Jerrod to be the entry point for this. And then, oh no, Catherine, you said they were beating it like a dead horse throughout the episode. And then the weekend update, which we will get to, I thought was great. So in contrast, looking at the whole episode, I sort of feel like, I don't know why you needed this. Like, you had Jerrod do a great monologue off the top. I thought Weekend handled it great in the middle. I'm not sure what this is adding, and it's not a great sketch. So like maybe you don't need it. But if somebody felt really strongly about it, I would have said like it needs to do more of what it's doing. It felt like it's a sketch that's almost like too short. Like beat me over the head with the premise. Like it's almost like too
That's
real.
a complaint that I don't know that anyone's ever said about SNL.
I think it might have been too real. Like they were really trying to stick to the actual moments that occurred. Like all the moments that their characters were responding to were beats that really happened in real life. And I wondered if that limited them a little bit. Like, let's take this into the absurd. Like, the cameras are not on Will Smith the whole time. Not everyone has the same image of that 5 or 10 minutes just looking at Will Smith. A lot of that moment afterward is looking at Chris Rock and hearing him respond to it. So there's moments in there where I think they could have built a new little universe, and even weirder stuff happened that we didn't get to see. And in this version, I felt like it sort of walked the line maybe a little bit too finely of trying to be realistic about it. But I like the idea. I almost want it to be like more weird, like more absurd.
No, that's a great point, because towards the end I was thinking like, okay, well, he's referencing the acceptance speech, but he's still in the audience. Now he's doing the getting jiggy with it dance, but that happened at the after party. So it's like they were just trying to like shoehorn all these little things into this one moment. And yeah, I have just really mixed feelings on it, because like I said about the monologue, I thought it was going to be so smart to let that be it. And then I was a little disappointed as soon as I saw like the Oscar stage on the opening. I was like, oh, okay. But then at some point I said, okay, fine, this is funny. Like I did enjoy it once, once Chris got up and then sat back down and then was just talking and was like, hold on, keep my wife's name. Like that was funny. That was a fun take on it. And I think it's a good angle to have. But yeah, I don't think we needed a whole sketch on it, even though it is a fun angle to explore. I don't know. It's like we had 4 slap segments. Let's cut 2 of them. Which one are the weakest 2, So yeah, Steve, what'd you think?
Well, I found it interesting. It is set in that moment, the moment that started this whole thing. But I feel like the story is really about how people are responding to it and how it makes them feel about Will Smith right now. Because this is what we're all talking about. Is like, hey, Will Smith seems really unhinged,
Right.
and that's really what they were exploring. And they did it in kind of like a Star Wars Rogue One way, where they took the gaps of a story and then found a new story in those untold parts. Because a lot of people were thinking, why was Will Smith laughing up until the point where they cut away from him? And then, next thing we know, he's up on stage slapping Chris Rock, People are wondering what happened in between. And I like the idea that everything that happened in between is more stuff to suggest that Will just needs to take a break and just like work on himself, because there seems to be something going on there. And just the fact that they tried to play it off like nothing happened, and the lack of consequences for him, just pumping up the distractions the entire time, I think was really what they were going for. The getting jiggy with it, everything's normal. So it's a different angle, but it's interesting. Like it's one of the biggest spectacles of the year, and this whole sketch takes place looking away from it.
Right.
I think that's really what it revolves around as an idea.
It's a creative angle to take, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So
I think it's
maybe it's one of the ones we would cut if we wanted to chop down the Will Smith, Chris Rock content. But I still found myself enjoying it.
Yeah, I would, Catherine. I would happy to take your direction and cut this one. I think it's covering ground that other segments are covering better. And I think the sketch might even still be struggling for a premise. Like, if you were pitching it to me as It's like, well, what were they doing when the camera? What was Will Smith doing when the camera wasn't on him? And be like, okay, what happens then? Like that's not the premise. So what is the premise? It's like, oh well, he's an even weirder guy than you think he is. Like I don't know. I think everybody thinks he's a pretty weird guy. So what are the weird things that happen? It's like, well, he talks to these seat fillers and he gets ideas from them for the speech he's about to give later. Like this sounds like 3 different bits at this point. Like I'm not sure. Yeah, I 100% understand what the bit is. Everyone's performing the heck out of it though. Like you can look for some silver linings in it. And I love Chris Redd to death. So like I would happily watch him do even a bit that I wasn't a super fan of.
Yeah. And and to be fair, there's 4 main segments about the slap. And sort of what you were saying at the top, Steve, about the Trump impression, in a way, maybe they are just casting a wide net. And, I would say most people probably watch SNL maybe in segments on YouTube or as it gets shared on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. So maybe they're just hoping one of these is going to stick, because everyone was looking for their commentary. So they're like, well, let's just give them a bunch and see which one everyone likes the most. There could be an argument that, like, while obviously they want the full show to be cohesive and be great, that maybe they are producing things more, thinking of them more individually as YouTube uploads,
Yeah.
And then there's also sort of the thing about, because I'll get frustrated sometimes, like I'll write a thing and then a director says like, well, that part, it's maybe not the most on game. I'm like, okay, but was it funny? Did you laugh? And I would never actually say that, but I think that. And like to some extent, like, did I laugh throughout this? Sure. But did I love it? No. So like, it's always funny to me that it is easy to critique something, but if you get down to the base of it, of like, well, did it make you laugh? That's really the main goal. And you're like, well, yeah. I don't know. So that's just me being too nice to a bunch of professional writers. Let's talk about these musical performances. Gunna performs Banking on Me and Pushin' P featuring Future. Now, Brian and Steve, we know you were in a band together. I assume we're thinking more rock band.
No, it was just like what you heard from Gunna.
Like
basically,
wow, okay.
that genre. We really were kind of the pinnacles of gangster rap in Toronto, weren't we, Brian?
Yeah, and it was really more about the jackets as well. Like we weren't really into the art part of it, as that wasn't our area of expertise. It was more about like fashion selection. Just like
That's right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, then, Brian, I can't wait to hear what you think. What do you think they ripped you off a little bit? Maybe.
Oh my God! Yeah, lawsuit pending. No, I wasn't familiar with Gunna. I enjoyed them both. I really, sometime musician in my life, as you now know. Really love music, and I love discovering new music of all kinds. So it's one of the things I like about the show so much is the musical guests that they book are so varied that you're always going to discover something new. And I love a band, which might be a weird thing to say, but sometimes people show up to the show and they don't bring a band. And I love when people bring a band, especially if what they do doesn't seem to be obviously bandable, which might be like this genre. I'm like, well, this wouldn't be played by a band. I'm like, I love that. And you got a guy in the background with a 5-string bass. Anytime you got a guy with a 5-string bass, I assume you mean business. And the drummer was awesome, like really drew my attention. So I they didn't bring the band for no reason. Like I enjoyed that they brought a band, and I appreciated the musicianship of the people that they brought. So I will look up some more Gunna. I'm gonna look up some Gunna.
Wow, he's gonna do it. Steve, what'd you think?
Brian seems to be responding better than I did. I mean, I didn't hate it, but I couldn't tell you what happened. I couldn't tell you what the songs were like. I couldn't, Pushin' P. I think I got help with like 2 references leading up to the song and being like, oh, that's what Pushin' P. That's why they keep saying that. But yeah, like I'm coming from total unfamiliarity. It's funny because it's both the musical guest and the host that I have like no frame of reference for. Interesting in that regard.
Yeah, this was the lineup that aged me.
Yeah, I was just that morph from Saving Private Ryan, where Matt Damon turns into the old guy. That's how I felt listening to this. But I mean, yeah, like I said, I didn't hate it. It felt a little bit, especially the second song. Like, I guess that's the style, but it felt low energy to me. Like it was very slow and kind of down here energy wise. Honestly, I felt myself coming away from this episode having enjoyed the joke song about short movies more so than the actual music from the musical guest.
I liked the first song was good. It had like a cool chill vibe. Brian, like you were saying with the band, like there was this one really cool drum fill that the drummer did that I loved.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm here for this.
Hello.
I was having a good time. And then that just really all went out the window with the second song.
I'm with you on that. I didn't. I don't know if I like looked away or something, but it was like 90 seconds. It was really short.
It was
And
less than 2 minutes.
Yeah, I felt like I missed it entirely, or maybe I wasn't paying attention, and I just didn't know. I had to look it up online later on. Again, like, well, I'm not familiar with his work. Is he like a sketch musician, where he just does choruses, or?
Steve, like you said, I'm not the target demo. I'm not the target demo for this, and that's okay.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's something here.
Sometimes things are not for you.
Exactly, and that's okay. I'm sure that there's something to like here. Like with the first song, I really liked. But the second song was not for me. I didn't get it. It went over my head. I don't know what push and P means. So yeah, I mean that's really the most I can offer on Gunna. Well, let's talk about update for their lead-in. Jost and Shay talk about the slap. Brian, was a solid outing of update.
Update is always my favorite segment of the show, and I enjoyed it again this week. I think this is the right spot to take this on. I thought the monologue was a good spot. I think this is a good spot. I think the sketch wasn't sure what it was trying to do, but this was good. These guys, they're good at what they do. I mean, not all of them are wins, but I always appreciate it when they try, and they're so affable that even when they don't get a solid laugh out of something, like it's hard to dislike them. So really good. I mean, there's some bits in here that like I don't know if I can repeat. They were pretty rough on Will Smith. I mean, like that Bad Boys joke is like that's dangerous territory. Like
Yeah.
they photoshopped him into a screen with like three of some of the most well-known and worst sexual assault people. Like it's not a fair comparison.
That image alone, yeah.
And
Yeah.
perhaps
Like,
shouldn't have done it.
It's not okay to slap people, but is he that bad?
Right? Like that's different. So that was rough. But like a lot of it was rough, but I still laughed at bits of it. I appreciated them like really taking the time in the way that Jerrod also did. So like let's let it breathe and let's tackle it from a couple of different angles.
Yeah, they came at it with some teeth, which is nice. Steve, was it a win for you?
Yeah. I really like that Trojan horse joke to open it up, where it starts off as a Putin joke, receiving misinformation from his aides, and then surprise, surprise, punchline is Will Smith related, and then proceeds to be Will Smith related for 90% of Weekend Update. We got into some Republican old man orgies towards the end, but I think our main chunk to deal with here is all the Will Smith material. And Brian made a good point, that it was particularly harsh. But on the same token, you gotta talk about it. This is the spot. They talk about the news on Weekend Update, and it's really hard to avoid something like this. It's almost required material.
Yeah. This was okay. It was a lot of slap content, which now we're beating the horse. I didn't need this much slap content, but So if I'm looking at it in the order of the show, at this point, I'm like, okay, we had the monologue, we had a sketch. I don't want all of Update to be slap jokes. But if we take it out of that and we're looking at, well, which of the slap content we got was best, I would say this was in the top 2. Like, I thought the monologue was a little sharper, and then there was, the desk bits about it. And like you said, Brian, to your point, this is the better place for it, I think. So like some of it was really sharp, some of it was like less good, but like they were all like pretty solid jokes. And I appreciate the tough spot that they're in. They feel like they need to comment, but it's just unfortunate timing. Um, but I don't know. That's why I thought the monologue was going to be so perfect.
Mm.
So yeah, there was stuff to like here, but looking at it in the whole of the show, this is where I really started to feel like, okay, we've had enough.
I think if I can add I don't know if this is a left turn or not, but I think there's also a medium is the message thing being done here. Like part of the narrative on this topic over the last week, it has been about what is okay to say and not say. Like the Will Smith slap thing, people have opinions and violence is never an option. And then there's Chris Rock did say a thing that was really offensive. And how offensive was it? Where do we put it on the line? How much should you know about your targets before you write things? Or even if you did know, is it still in the realm of jokes? And I've seen lots of comedians online and in person, not like in person to me, but be interviewed over the last week. Seen lots of comedians come out and defend jokes to say, like, we should be able to make whatever jokes. And if you don't like them, you can leave or you can not like them, but you don't get to do this. But we get to make jokes about you. And I thought at this point in the narrative, like the public narrative, at this point in the week, for Weekend Update to come out and say, like as a meta commentary, you'd be like, we're going to spend 75% of the segment making fun of Will Smith, and it's going to be harsh. I think is SNL and Weekend Update coming out without being interviewed on it and saying, like, we're coming out on the side of jokes, and the hell with this guy. Like, if you don't like jokes, here are jokes, buddy. So like I thought it, I thought it was a little aggressive.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's it's an interesting time in the world where you definitely have to put more consideration and thought into jokes than you feel like you ever have before. But yeah, I like that. I like that as like this is their commentary on that side of it. That's really interesting. But yeah, let's talk about these features. Marsha Blackburn attempts to define woman. Steve, how'd you enjoy this character?
I thought it was great. With all the stuff happening with the Supreme Court, it's an appropriate subject matter. Cecily is just the cast member to go to for, a quick and dirty character, based on what's going on. She always can find something to latch onto and really, make something out of it. And I don't know this particular politician, but it's not surprising that someone of this political leading would be asking ridiculous questions. So yeah, it was kind of surprising because I saw bits and pieces, but I didn't listen to the whole hearing or whatever you call it. But yeah, some of the actual questions she's been asked are pretty ridiculous. But yeah, Cecily was just making me laugh. If it wasn't just the ridiculousness of how these hearings tend to go, just her pronunciation of woman alone makes this a sketch worth turning into.
Woman?
Define woman.
Fair enough. High marks. Brian, do you agree?
Yeah, I really like this one. I like the premise of this a lot. I feel like there's probably another 25% she could have gotten out of it. But I really like the premise of this. Cecily is great. She's really good at this sort of thing. I still haven't stopped thinking about Goober the Clown. Please give her 2 minutes of every weekend update to do whatever she wants with at all times. Yeah, this was really funny, right? Like, it's really hard, and this is, I guess, where I'll play my experience card. Like, it can be really hard to take things that are challenging in your real life and make them feel safe to laugh at. And God, is she good at it? And one another great example. It made me think about the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. And I don't know if you saw this going around online, but there was a letter. I think this is a meme. I think it's a joke, but there was a letter going around about as if it was written by a teacher in Florida saying, like, okay, we're no longer now allowed to use gendered pronouns in our classrooms. You'd be happy to know we'll be no longer referring to you as mothers or fathers or misters or misses. We'll be no longer using any gendered pronouns for your children. We'll be referring to them by these. There's a list of pronouns, like it's a letter. It's sort of like hosted by your own petard. It's like if you're in the group of people who wanted the Don't Say Gay bill, this is the logical reaction. Like you have to take it even further. You're making it even harder on yourselves.
Your
so that's
child
what
is
I
now
was.
It.
You're just all it's yeah, that's right. Like if you don't want us to think thoughtfully in this space, then this is the result of that. And that's where my brain went looking at this was you can't start boxing people and ideas into these rigid spaces. And as soon as you start poking at people's conception of those rigid spaces, it just becomes this absurd nonsense. And she's just such a genius to be able to figure out, like, that's where the fun is. That's the fun of this bit. Like, I'm going to pull out a card with pink and like a lady from a Far Side comic, like, that's what women are. We all know that's all that women are. Doesn't need to be any more complex than that.
They be shopping.
Yeah, but even her, that character, other people who would see themselves in that character would have to say, wait a second, that doesn't resonate for me. Like, that's not my concept of woman. So what a great premise to like get to the heart of that in a fun way and make it safe for people, hopefully.
Yeah, this was good. Cecily's always wonderful, and I thought the commentary here was pretty sharp. And that even if you want to play into this like very conservative notion of what is a woman, it's still like way too complex. Like even like biologically, there's like a million different things that like go into it. So I like that they found a fun way to say that. I don't have a lot to add. You guys really said it all. Good stuff from Cecily. Let's talk about the next one. O.J. Simpson knows all too well that love makes you do crazy things. Allegedly. Brian, what'd you make of those?
Why? Why this? Why this thing? I enjoyed it. I'll say that up front. I enjoyed it. It's like it just feels like a bit written like 20 years too late or something. I don't know. Am I missing? I'm happy to be wrong, but genuinely enjoyed it. I'll say it again. I think the best OJ jokes you could write given the premise that they have for that. But I also was like, I don't know why. What is this doing?
I mean, OJ did like come out and like condemn Will Smith for slapping Chris Rock. He's like,
okay, all right,
wrong, and we're like, what? So like that was sort of the.
That's what I'm missing.
Right.
All right. I missed that beat. My apologies. So I asked the why and I got a solid answer. Thank you.
I don't know. I think the why still stands.
Okay.
Well, why? Is there a reason that they thought, let's put OJ on this? Sure. Like real life OJ did say something about it. But why did we need to see?
But lots of people
OJ
said stuff about it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Like literally the one note that I actually wrote down was maybe we're maxed out on slap commentary. Like there's nothing bad here. I like Keenan's OJ. I like the jokes. I can't fault the writing of it. I can only fault of the slap things we saw. This was the last one, and I think probably the weakest one. And at this point in the show, I just wanted to see something like the iceberg that sank the Titanic. I wanted to see a goofy character. I wanted to see something that just felt like really heightened and sketch comedy. Everything's been, I don't know, kind of grounded.
It's heavy.
I don't know. I was just looking for like a kooky character at this point, Yeah. And then it was OJ talking about the slap.
Kooky OJ.
Fair. I don't know. So, I think we've said it a million times. They needed to pick the top 2 slap things, and this wasn't the top 2. Steve, any final thoughts?
Well, yeah, I did catch wind of the OJ response. And I think what was interesting about it was that it was like surprisingly self-aware. Because wasn't what he tweeted something along the lines of, imagine if I was the one who did it. Y'all hate me. So like, how would you respond to that?
Maybe, yeah.
Worse,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah. But it was a good point to make, and something that he had an interesting vantage point to make. Wow, there's still some use to OJ. But the piece itself didn't seem to have much of that in it. I mean, it was mainly just like, haha, OJ's a murderer jokes. If the glove fits, it's a lot of stuff we tend. It did feel out of place because they went back to the 90s and started digging up a bunch of jokes about OJ they would have made at that time. And it was less tied to, why OJ is connected to this in the first place. And it's he's just as much connected to it as you or, Bride or Catherine or myself are. It's just people who are talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if they were going to do something about this, they probably should have tied it more to, what was said than just saying, "Oh, OJ's on the radar again. Let's do an OJ bit."
I think it just feels out of place for all
Yeah,
of
it
us.
just feels out of place.
We
Yeah.
appreciate that it has some connection, but it's just not enough. Sort of. I totally agree,
Yeah.
Catherine, with what you're saying. Like a lot of this has been heavy. Like all the slap stuff is heavy. Touches on some pretty heavy subject matter. So it'd be great at this point if there was something a little bit like a palate cleanser to get out of that and into the next section.
Yeah. Let's talk about that next section though. Let's get into the back half of this show. Some misguided funeral directors throw Pop Pop's body off of a cliff. Brian, was this a win?
No, I love your description of it. I actually want to see the sketch you just described. Again, I feel like I'm trying not to be the Debbie Downer of this episode, but I think there are a lot of sketches in this category for me where like the performances are good and I appreciate the effort and there's some ideas in there that I like. Yeah, the concept I'm on board with. The premise you just read, like a bunch of funeral directors accidentally throw their dad off a cliff. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I'd like to see whatever that is. But I don't know if this found its feet either, like from the very beginning. Like I'm not sure if the idea is that the funeral workers are bad at their job all around, or is the problem that they misunderstood this specific instruction about cremating him and now they're dealing with the fallout? Or are they just like not even people? Because he jumped over a cliff to pull another guy out of the, which is like a totally insane thing. So yeah, like there were a lot of weird things happening, and I laughed at a lot of it. And Catherine, I think you were saying that about a previous bit. I'm like, I laughed at a lot of things that were happening, but I was also sort of confused about what I was watching at the same time.
Yeah, this feels like I think you were saying earlier. It's interesting to figure out which things can translate from film to stage or stage to film. And this feels like an idea that I would love to see at like a black box theater as a blackout where they throw the body off, ha ha ha, lights go down. And that's all we needed of it. It's how do you heighten from that? Where did you go from there? It's so I thought that was so funny. I loved that. When they picked that body up, I was dying. That's ridiculous and it's hilarious. And then after that, it just sort of kept going for a few minutes and ended. I don't think, like you said, like they didn't quite find their footing. They didn't quite know what to do with it after that one really funny beat.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I am willing to forgive it a little bit because I do think that was so funny and I love that bit of it. But you're right. Like it's not overall super strong. Steve, where'd you land?
Well, there was mention of the performances being good, and yeah, I thought the way it began so sincerely set it up pretty well because I was there kind of feeling some sympathy for this family. I could actually imagine them grieving a lost family member. And that made me think, oh God, well, this can only go bad. We are in a comedy sketch after all. You don't tug at my heartstrings like this unless you're going to do something to just cut it with scissors. And yeah, we got to the idea behind it all. We're throwing the remains over, but not actually doing the part you're supposed to and cremate them. Yeah, that was the idea, I think, that started the sketch. But then when it came to filling out the time, the ideas that they came up with felt very random. Now, fortunately, all these random ideas did each make me laugh individually.
Yeah.
But when it came to crafting a sketch and having things organically stem from your premise, I feel like, these comedy writers weren't drawing on whatever training they've had leading up to their career with SNL. They were just like, let's just get some funny stuff on paper. Like I was saying about 90-minute movies, it can either be, a really good story that's edited well, or it could be just like, we got to fill this time. And I think this might be the latter in that analogy.
Yeah, it's like the nugget of this idea, the thing that they went off of was really funny. And that was that. So love and hate it. Let's talk about the next one though. This out of town cousin ruins the story. Steve, was this a win?
Oh God, yes. I remember feeling nervous getting to this point of the show and not seeing any good Kyle material. I mean, I should be used
Kyle
to that.
stan.
I'm a Kyle stan, and I should be used to him being cut for time at this point. This is why I love Kyle as a performer and a writer and everything, because everything he does feels blown out of proportion. It feels very exaggerated, but also feels real. Like I can actually imagine meeting somebody like this. I may be this person myself. But I think we've all met someone who like wants to project that they're interested in the story because they know that's what a likable person should do, but they focus on the wrong things.
Yeah.
And
I know
it
this person for sure.
Yes, it goes against everything they're trying to do, and it's heartbreaking. But I think that familiarity is what makes it so hilarious. And Kyle does it so well. Like it's obviously turned to 11, and then we get that great crescendo at the end where he just decides to body slam the table. Yeah, this is the creme de la creme of what Kyle does, and yeah, I'm glad we got this.
Do we think the table thing was planned?
Is this a Jason Sudeikis style try to get everybody to break moment? You think?
The
Never even
Echo
thought
and
about it.
Heidi's reactions just seemed very surprised. And then there was like a solid like 10 seconds of floundering. What do we do now?
While he's walking into the kitchen before he leaves.
I was thinking it might be a sort of a Californians situation, which notoriously had Fred Armisen do a much more muted version of that accent when they were rehearsing it, and then show up and go, and like that became the premise of that bit, is how insane Fred in particular, but everyone else started doing it. And I wondered if it was that sort of thing where like they was like, yeah, and then at the end he sort of clumsily gets out of the chair, and he does his clumsily getting out of the chair all throughout the week, and knowing that when he gets to air, he's just gonna ruin it. That was my conspiracy theory.
Yeah, I like that. That makes sense. Like I think something was different because they seemed totally blown away. So something changed, whether it was completely unscripted or he just like played it down until that moment.
Yeah.
It was an
It also
interesting
like
thing.
doesn't belong there. Like that character's problem is not this.
Right.
It was funny. I laughed at it.
Brian, what did you think of the sketch?
I think I'm in Steve's territory of like really loving Kyle Mooney stuff when it's great. That being said, I think it's hard for it to be like really great. I don't know where I'm sure we could make some sort of graph where it's like, I'm not quite satisfied. It takes a lot for me to get there, but then if Kyle can really get me there, it's just fabulous. And I don't know if this got me all the way there, but I always love his characters. It was fun. I enjoyed watching it. I think it probably could have been shorter. Like I got it.
Mhm.
I got it early. Not saying I got it early. Like, you made the point early. And it might have been a little bit lower energy than it needed to be. To be honest, I wonder if it could use with a little bit of that, like body throwing energy somewhere else in it. Like make it even weirder, right? Like make his confusion just more absurd than he is. But I love watching Kyle do stuff, so appreciate the effort.
Yeah. This is what Kyle does best, right? And like he did it really well. And I know this person, and like I love that it's universal enough that it's like, oh, weird guy just wants to seem cool and likable, but it's also like has a little bit of specificity of like I know people that have come to visit in New York and they think every little thing about New York is cool and they like want to seem like they belong. So like that's sort of that was fun for me. But then I don't know, it didn't heighten much. It was just sort of he ruins the story, he ruined it again, he ruined it again. He fell on the table. I would have liked to see him ruin it maybe in different ways, But yeah, I mean, there's something to like here about Kyle. It's not cut for time. Good for him. And a big ending nonetheless. Let's talk about this 10-1. The Born This Way collection introduces onesies for potentially gay babies. And I loved this. This is a topic that I've always wanted to see discussed because it's based on that thing about conservatives are always crying about how like any education or acknowledgement of queer identities in school is like somehow sexualizing the children, and then they turn around and have their baby in a shirt that says like heartbreaker, like hide your daughters or whatever, and you're like, you're the problem here. So I love that they did this piece. I've been wanting to see this piece for a long time. And it turns that on its head. Some of the sayings were so funny, like the things that they were putting them in. But again, not a ton of heightening. It was just sort of listing funny things that could be on the onesies. And I think if this had been earlier in the show or on a different episode, I wouldn't care about that. Like, I wouldn't be complaining about that. I think I would just be like, oh yeah, I love this. All the sayings were so funny. Ha ha ha. Great to see this topic. But at the end of a show that I haven't been super warm on, I was like, oh, well, they could have heightened it more. um, so, it's always interesting to, if I critique it solely as the sketch it was, then it's probably really good and I like it. But if I look at it in the scheme, then I can't say that I loved it unequivocally. Brian, what'd you think?
I thought it was okay. I like the premise a lot as well, and Bowen Yang is one of my faves. So like, I think they didn't cut to his disgruntled face enough. He's just so funny, and he just needs a little bit of a look. And those are the bits I was laughing at the most. I wasn't sure of the. I think it's a tone thing where initially I wondered if it felt a little bit lecture-y in its premise. And then it softened a little bit. And then at the end, especially when it got to the Harvey Milk shirt, and I was thinking, you could sell that. That's a real shirt. you could sell that. I love milk, ... Harvey Milk. I'm like, 100% there's a market for that shirt. So then I was thinking like, oh, I wonder if that like should have been what they drove home, where it's more like a reclaiming of the space. It's like, oh, you're going to put things on your babies that are like a little bit out of line. We're going to put things on our babies that you're going to think are a little bit out of line, but we're going to love. And you could literally sell for $30. And here's an example. And in that case, the premise would be something like that. It's like, well, we're not lecturing you for doing it. We just want to get on board and do it our way. And that would be the bit. And so I was a little unsure exactly where it was trying to land, but I like the general idea.
Yeah, fair enough. Steve, any closing thoughts?
Well, to me, I feel like what this sketch is saying is, if you feel like this is ridiculous, well, guess what? It's always been ridiculous. No matter the role that you're forcing on your child, it's a silly thing to do. And I think what's funny about this is that they're responding to the forcing of gender roles as if to say we need more equity in our role forcing on children, and not
right.
the actual response, which is it should be done away with. We need equal opportunity assumptions of who our children are going to be. That's kind of what they're pretending their stance on this issue is, and that's where the humor comes from. And they even throw in that joke to kind of prove that people are in this sketch are misguided. Forget who was it, Kyle, who said the incredibly homophobic remark towards the end that kind of revealed that they just.
I think was it Andrew?
They're
one of them, but yeah, it was like we know how
those gays are.
Promiscuous they are, or whatever.
Yeah. And they did, and Bowen and Jerrod look at each other. Yeah, I feel like that kind of put a button on it as if to say, yeah, this is very misguided in nature.
Yeah, so like there's definitely something to like here in the premise and the commentary. Maybe something to be desired with the execution or even the timing of it. Kind of a weird thing to slot in the 10-1. Obviously, I think the show was running long, and this was the thing that was the right length of time to put here. Not so much this was the craziest, most 10-1-ish material that they had. But it definitely felt a little like, it's a pre-tape and it's just like a regular commercial parody. So yeah, I don't know. There were a lot of sort of things going into this, but something to like about it for sure. Now that is the end of the rundown.
Ooh.
Woo! We ready to talk about these overall thoughts?
Let's do it.
My thoughts are hardly overall.
All right. Well, up first we have moment of the night. Brian, what would you give it to?
I think I'm going to give it to Jerrod, just for that first moment in the monologue where, or that first beat of his monologue where he's saying like, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it. I thought it was, pardon. I thought it was such a strategically smart way to get into it. I think there's a version of this monologue or this whole show that like just turns people off because they're mostly over it. I think in that moment, like I was really pulled into it. I was interested in how he was framing this, and I was really interested in what the next few minutes were going to be like. And there wasn't another moment in the show like that for me, so I'm going to give it to him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the monologue was some of the strongest material, and my moment of the night is also going to come from the monologue, where he says, Obama, join me over on camera too. And then has that little callback to the nation needs to heal. That little beat was really good. I loved it. I thought it was so funny and so unique. Steve, what's your moment?
Oh, I'm trying to remember what the exact word was, but it was Ego's lovely turn of phrase, Vajazzafro. Was that it?
I believe Vajafro. Mm-hmm.
That one just caught me. I wasn't expecting it. I couldn't even tell you why it made me laugh. I guess it's just the tension I was feeling. Like I was really holding in a lot, just trying to make sense of what I was watching on live television. And then they just threw in Vajafro at me. And it broke me. I was broke, and it took a while to recover.
Yeah, that's not a word I ever expected to hear. But I'm glad I did. Let's talk about our best sketch, though. Brian, what's your best sketch?
Well, I think I said earlier, I'm trying not to be a Debbie Downer about the episode. There's lots of good ingredients in it. I think it struggled to put forth like a thing that worked 100% through and through. Um, so I might have to, as a tie, put up the "What's Wrong with Your Brain," which I don't know that any of us like really hailed as a like a great piece of art, but um, I enjoyed it. And I thought it was funny. I think all around, like pluses to minuses. I thought I did a good job and touched on something that I haven't seen like a lot of people comment on in that way. So I appreciated the intent. I thought I had some laughs, and the laugh line for me that stuck with me through the night was that mushrooms line. So I'll give it to for that. But as a tie, I might give it to Cecily for the defining how to define a woman bit. I just love her stuff. This thing is so great. It's really difficult to make that challenging content seem fun and safe. And it really is fun. Like, it's really fun to watch her in character try to define what this thing is. So I really like that one too. So I'll give them both.
I'll allow it. A tie. Sometimes I make people choose, but I think that's fair. I feel like you had a first place and a runner up. So, uh, I was torn. I thought the monologue was the strongest piece of the night, but can I really give the monologue best sketch? I don't think so.
It's not best monologue.
It's your
Especially since
podcast.
it is. That's true. That's true. But like, especially like it wasn't a particularly like sketchy monologue. It was basically a stand-up monologue. Sometimes they feel a little bit more like a sketch, like a few weeks ago with Zoe Kravitz. But so since I'm not going to allow myself to give it to that, I think I'm gonna go with short ass movie. I think that was the other strongest piece. It gave me the most to enjoy. It feels pretty shareable. Um, so yeah, I really liked that piece, and that was maybe like the one sketch that I was like, oh yeah, start to finish, I liked this. So yeah, Steve, what's yours?
I'm going with that shopping channel sketch. I feel like it made
Jafro.
me laugh with words. It made me laugh with images, the characters, the idea of it. Uh, I just thought it was very well rounded in how I responded to it because, yes, it made me laugh for a number of reasons. But some of the best laughter is when other emotions creep in with it. When you're laughing, but you're uncomfortable, when you're disturbed to a certain degree. Uh, I guess it's the kind of thing that thrill seekers look for when they go into haunted houses and roller coasters. It's just like I need to feel anxiety with my humor, and I feel like this had it in spades. And yeah, it was all that, and it was also a good showcase for the host. And I loved watching Jerrod ham it up. And this is where he actually felt like he blended in as a cast member. So I think the sketch, while it made me laugh and all that, it showcased a lot of strengths that the show had overall. So I think it deserves it for that.
Fair enough. Yeah, it was a very solid sketch. I liked that one too. Let's talk about MVP. Brian, who is it?
It's got to be Jerrod for the monologue. I think. I love when a stand-up hosts the show. You're talking about monologues or sometimes sketches, which happens often. I really love a stand-up that can come out on their own with personality and deliver a chunk of comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was great. He was just so personable and friendly, and I just felt like immediately, like I wasn't familiar with his work either, so I'm learning about him now, having seen the episode. But immediately when he came out, I thought like it just felt watchable.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he's, that moment I've already given moment of the night, the first minute of him talking, felt like this is really smart. So I'm going to give it to him for that, and I look forward to seeing more of him do other things.
Yeah, I had a hard time picking MVP this time. I think I thought about giving it to Heidi because she was just in a lot of stuff and doing a lot of work and a lot of stuff and giving some really good performances. But I think you're right. I think it's Jerrod. That like I said, I think the monologue was the strongest piece of the night, and I thought he brought some stuff to the show. I saw something online that maybe the baby onesie thing was actually inspired by a piece from his special. Um, you know, he was someone that had a good energy, uh, brought a really solid monologue, and I was excited for him while I wasn't necessarily as excited for all of the sketches and stuff. So I think Jerrod as the MVP feels right. Steve, where are you gonna land?
Mr. Carmichael, I think, deserves it.
Wow,
And
unanimous.
yeah, this guy won me over so much that, when Weekend Update ended and they got back to sketches, I remember thinking, oh, I missed this guy while
Mhm.
while they were doing Weekend Update. I'm glad he's back in the mix in sketches. And this is somebody that I basically had just become familiar with as a performer watching the same show. And I'm already being like, oh, I missed you during Weekend Update. So, yeah, to say that this guy won me over in the short time we spent together watching SNL, that's an understatement.
Yeah. First time host, unanimous MVP. Wow.
Yeah.
What a win. All right, well, let's talk about this big one on a scale of classic, great, decent, weak, or train wreck. Brian, how would you rate this episode?
I thought it was weak. I'm sorry. I don't mean to. You have me on, I bring the weak ones, I guess. Um, yeah, I think that's what that means when you say, had a lot of good ingredients. That's
Mhm.
that's weak in more words. Some good jokes in it though. Again, like the Gerard's opener was great. His line about healing the nation, can't even heal his own family, stuck with me. A mushroom joke, which is not as good a joke as I keep on harping about, but I laughed at it. Yeah, enjoyed short ass movie for like how much effort they put into it. Weekend Update was good for me. There's some good bits in it. Like there's lots of bits that I liked along the way, but I think every piece sort of failed to find its feet in a really confident way. So it's sort of too many misses.
That's fair. That's fair. I dabbled with weak. I don't think I've ever given a week. Um, it's it's definitely it's on the fence for me. I think there are enough. I don't know. There's enough to like about it that I think it makes its way to decent for me because you're right. There's a lot of premises that just didn't deliver. There were great premises, but they didn't deliver on them. Um, and then there's some stuff like the doll where I was like, there's just too much setup, but I loved it once it got to it. Um, but there were some really good things. Like the monologue was so good. I think we had a really good first time host. I think there were enough premises that delivered enough that I still kind of liked the sketch overall. So I'm gonna give it a decent, but it's barely a decent for me on this one. Steve, where are you going?
Yeah, decent sounds good, but a week is very understandable from like a comedy writer's perspective. You would probably point to a lot of things and say, okay, you should know better as a professional than to try to get away with this. And yeah, there was definitely some we need to finish this kind of vibe going through a lot of these sketches. But like just, if I just turn my brain off uh and just enjoy what I'm presented, there was plenty to laugh at. Did it organically like earn those beats? Probably not. Uh so yeah, it's a tough one because yeah, it made me laugh on a very superficial level.
Mhm.
So yeah, at the end of the day, I'm tuning into SNL to laugh, so I will give it a decent. But yeah, it definitely missed out on any chance of being great or a classic for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, definitely not a highlight of the season, but I'm glad we maybe found some things to talk about. And Brian, thank you so much. I loved hearing your commentary. I think you had some really unique things to offer the conversation. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. It was delightful, and I would love to do it again.
Yeah.
I'll actually be sending Brian as my proxy from now on, and he will
okay.
be joining you instead of me starting now. Right, Brian? Like we discussed.
I'm going to support you as a friend and nod.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks to Brian Crosby and Steve Finn. And thanks as well to our most generous patrons, Neil Weinstein, Justin Gardner, Grace Kogan, and Brian Clark. If you're enjoying our show, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever better podcasts can be found. Your subscription helps us grow. Your support is greatly appreciated. We'll be back in 1 week when SNL returns with host evil scarf-stealing Jake Gyllenhaal and musical guest Camila Cabello. But until then, this has been episode number 157 of the Saturday Night Live Afterparty podcast. I'm Catherine Coleman. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.